Hi, everybody. Great to see you. Really looking forward to learning with you and just seeing where people are saying they're coming from. It's pretty amazing that, it's really quite a diverse geography that you're all representing. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Hopefully everybody can see this. And before we get started with learning Torah, I understand from Rabbi Micah that we generally begin with saying blessing on learning Torah, which is, of course, only even more appropriate given that the name of the Jewish educational organization is La'atzok, to busy oneself, which is used in this blessing, at least in the Ashkenazic version of the blessing. So I mentioned that specifically because actually I'm Ashkenazic on my mom's side, Sephardic on my dad's side. I generally follow Sephardic traditions. And it so happens this is one of the few blessings, few brachot, where we have a difference between Sephardic and Ashkenazic practice and wording. The Ashkenazic text ends with la'asok b'divrei Torah, to busy oneself with the words of Torah, whereas the Sephardic ending is al divrei Torah, on the words of the Torah. Anyway, regardless of how you're saying it, if you haven't yet said this bracha today, since once you say it, it does count for any Torah you learn the entire day, I invite you to say it together with me. And you can feel free to unmute. We'll say it as like a big cacophony all together. I think that'll be more fun, just me saying it out loud. So I invite you to join me now. Baruch atah Elohim melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al divrei Torah. Great. Thanks, everybody. That was fun. Okay, so now that we've established that we're doing a mitzvah here, we're fulfilling the commandment, and we are making ourselves holy by studying Torah. Let's study some Torah. Okay, so I'm going to start off with a source from the Tanakh, from the Bible, from the book of Iyov or Job, which is in the writing. That expresses the feeling of a lack of hope, a lack of tikvah, which some people might be feeling more acutely today or for the past year and a half. Let's take a quick look. If you're game to do some text reading in English, if you can pop your name in the chat, then I'll know, or Rabbi Mike will know who to call on to read, so that we won't be just left waiting to see who wants to volunteer at a given time. So has anybody shared a name as being game to?
I can start us off if you want.
Perfect.
Okay, text 1.
You got it.
Where then is my hope? And my hope, who can glimpse it?
Okay, so Iyov is really a very tragic character in many ways. If you're not familiar with this book of the Tanakh of the Bible, definitely encourage you to look at it. It's very philosophically and theologically interesting. And he expresses this despair, right? Where is my hope? My hope, who can glimpse it, right? It's nowhere. And so this word uses the word for tikva, for hope, twice, right? But in a very negative sense. Okay, that might be describing how some of us are feeling much of the time or some of the time. And I thought maybe that we would look at the very first instance of the word tikva in the Tanakh, in the Bible. So it doesn't appear anywhere in the whole Torah, but it does appear in the first book of the prophets, of the Nevi'im, in the book of Joshua, which is right after the Torah in terms of its chronology. So, at the end of the Torah, we have the Israelites encamped on the east bank of the Jordan River in the land of Moab, modern day Jordan. And then Moses dies and they mourn for him, end of Torah. Beginning of the book of Joshua, they're making preparations to cross over the Jordan River and to go take the city of Jericho. So that's the context for what's going on here. There's in order to sort of catch the story and get up to the point where it talks about the word tikva, we got to read a bunch. So if Rabbi Micah, if you can call on somebody who will read, and this can be read on a fairly quick pace.
Oh, I see Janet. Janet, are you volunteering to read?
Yeshua, son of Nun, sent 2 men, spies from Shittim, secretly saying, "Go look over the land, especially Jericho." They went and they came to the house of a whore woman. Her name was Rahav, and they lay down there. The king of Jericho was told, saying, "Here, some men have come here tonight from the children of Israel to search out the land." So the king of Jericho sent to Rahav, saying, "Bring out the men who came to you, who came to your house, for it is to search out the entire land that they have come." But the woman took the two men and concealed them. Then she said, "Certainly the men came to me, but I do not know where they were from." And it was, as the gate was about to be closed at dark, that the men went out. I do not know where the men went. Pursue quickly after them, for you may overtake them.
Okay, thanks, Janet. So we're still, there's still more of this source to come, but I just want to give a quick summary thus far. So the Israelites are sending 2 spies into the land, which is clearly a reference back to in the Torah in the Midbar Numbers when Moses sends 12 spies into the land. 10 come back with very negative reports saying there's no way we can go into the land of Israel. The people there are like giants, and we're like grasshoppers in our eyes compared to them. They're just going to clobber us. But only 2 spies, Joshua and Caleb, or Joshua and Caleb, say we can do it, have some faith, right? So this time, Joshua, who now is no longer one of the spies, but is the leader of the Jewish people, having been Moses' successor, says, okay, we're not going to send in 12. Obviously, that was a mistake last time, 40 years ago, 39 years ago. We're going to send in only 2. Okay, we don't get the names of them. And they go to Jericho and they stay in Rahav's home. And she hides them, even though the king's soldiers, come looking for these spies. Okay, let's keep going. Janet, you want to read more? There we go.
As for them, scarcely
Oh, sorry,
had...
just go up to the top of the page, please.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No
Now
worries.
she brought them up to the roof and had hidden them in the stalks of flax, the ones arranged by her on the roof. Now the men pursued after them by way of the Jordan at the river crossings, and they closed the gate after the pursuers had gone out after them. Continue. As for them, scarcely had they lay down when she came up to them on the roof. She said to the men, "I know that the Eternal has given you the land, and that the dread of you has fallen upon us. All the settled folk of the land are quivering before you. For we heard about how the Eternal dried up the waters of the Sea of Reeds before you when you went out of Egypt, and what you did to the 2 Amorite kings who were across the Jordan, to Sihon and to Og, whom you devoted to destruction. We heard, and our hearts melted in fear, and no life breath rose within anyone because of you. For the Eternal, your God, is God in the heavens above and on the earth beneath. So now pray, swear to me by the Eternal, that since I have acted toward you with loyalty, you also will act toward my father's house with loyalty, and will give me a trustworthy sign. You will keep alive my father and my mother and my brothers and my sisters, and all those belonging to them, and save our lives from death."
Thanks, Janet. So Rahav now gives this long speech to the 2 spies. She's quite poetic, right? And actually here is even quoting from the Torah, the Song of the Sea that the Israelites sang after crossing successfully through the Sea of Reeds, and then the Egyptian army that was pursuing them gets drowned, includes the line of the dread of you has fallen upon us, all the settled folk of the land are quivering before you. That's basically a quote from the Torah, just sort of with some of the people reversed, because it's not has fallen upon us, but has fallen upon them and things like that. Anyway, so the way the story is written, like Rahav is not only someone who is poetic, seems like highly literate, But she's able to quote the Torah. She's clearly a monotheist. She's referring to like the one God, etc. And she's very sympathetic to these two Israelite spies. Okay, so she said, I'll help you out, but you gotta save me and my family when it comes time for the Israelites to come conquer Jericho, right? All right, so almost done with the source. Is there somebody else who wanted to read?
I can continue unless anybody else
Great.
wants to volunteer. We're at the men. The men said to her,
Yeah.
Our life shall be in place of yours to die, as long as you do not tell this business of ours. And it will be at the Eternal's giving the land to us that we will act toward you in loyalty and faithfulness. Then she let them down by a rope through the window, for her house was on the outer part of the wall, and in the wall she dwelt. And she said to them, To the highlands go, lest the pursuers encounter you, and hide yourselves there for 3 days, until the pursuers return. Afterward, you may go on your way.
Okay, so I'll just jump in for a quick sec. So notice that she lives in the wall, right? The wall is very thick. In fact, probably had 2 layers of walls, and people's homes were built in the walls. These probably would not have been the wealthiest or most aristocratic people, because if you're in the wall, you're the most exposed, right? And it's probably also not the largest living quarters. But I'm pointing this out specifically because it'll come up later. Okay, so she's living in the wall. She lets them down through the window, which then puts the 2 spies outside the wall and tells them, don't go east back to the Jordan, right, to go right back to the rest of the Israelites. Go west to the hills, and then you'll evade capture. And then in 3 days, then go back the way you came. Okay, Rabbi Micah, you can keep going.
The men said to her, We are clear of this your sworn oath, which you have had us swear. Here, when we come to the land, this cord, tikvah, of scarlet thread, you are to tie in the window through which you let us down. While your father and your mother and your brothers and all your father's household you are to gather to yourself in the land. And it shall be, whoever goes out of the doors of your house outside, his blood will be on his head, and we will be clear. While whoever will be with you in the house, his blood will be on our head, if any hand be against him. Now, if you tell this business of ours, we will clear from your sworn oath that you have had us swear. She said, In accordance with your words, so be it. So she sent them off, and they went, and she tied the scarlet cord, tikvah, through the window.
Okay, so these are the first 2 times that the word tikvah, which we usually think of as meaning hope, appear in the whole Tanakh, in the whole Bible. And here it doesn't mean hope, right? It means a cord, a rope, right? Now it's not the word that's used for the rope that she's using, that she's letting the 2 spies go down the wall, right? It's not like the rappelling rope kind of thing, but rather it's some sort of rope that she's just dangling out her window as part of the sign that this is her home, so the Israelites will not attack her and her family later on, right? And so it's a tikvat hut hashani, a cord of scarlet thread. I'm wondering if anyone has any thoughts on what this might symbolize, what it might echo. Bob, jump in.
When Abraham was involved in the battle of the 4 kings against the 5, and he got Lot back, he didn't take any stuff, any booty. He said, I won't even take a thread or a sandal strap. And this is the thread.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great, interesting. Right, so there it's also, I think the word used there is chut, so also a thread. But yes, expressing something that seems very like small, maybe even insignificant, right? Okay, so maybe this is kind of a reference to that, because here we're also talking about like oaths and like not hurting anyone at all within her family. Okay, nice connection, Bob. Anyone else have a connection?
We have a
Or any
couple of
thoughts?
comments in the chat, if I can read them to you. So Adam says the blood is like circumcision. Vicky says like the indivisible thread. And then Lauren says it seems to echo the marking of the doorposts when the Jews were leaving Egypt during the Passover.
Yeah, so there's all of those are interesting comments. To me, I was definitely reminded of the idea of painting the doorposts with blood the night before our ancestors left Egypt, and because it's red that is marking for protection against death, right? Okay. Now, there's another thing that reading this reminded me of, especially because the first couple chapters of Joshua are read as the Haftarah, as the prophetic reading that is done after the Torah reading in synagogues. And it's paired with the story of the spies in the Torah when Moses sends the 12 spies, and it's an unsuccessful mission in total, which is from Parashat Shalach, send, because it's the first word of the parashat is God saying to Moses, send the spies. And in that so that's the story in the parashat, and the Haftarah, the prophetic reading paired with it, is this story from Joshua, because it's like the other version of the spy story, right? Makes sense. At the end of that parasha, after the whole spy story, we get a mitzvah, we get a commandment. So if someone wants to read text number 3 here.
Can I call on Bob to read it? Because this is going to relate to the comment that he just put in the chat.
Okay. The Eternal spoke to Moshe, saying, "Speak to the children of Israel and say to them that they are to make themselves tassels on the corners of their garments throughout their generations, and are to put on the corner tassel of a thread of blue violet. It shall be for you a tassel, that you may look at it and remember all the commandments of the Eternal and do them, that you not go scouting around after your heart, after your eyes, that you go whoring after, in order that you may remember and do all my commandments and be holy to your God."
All right. Thanks, Bob. So, right, as Bob raised in the chat, the idea of the red thread is reminiscent of like the different colors of things that are in the Torah, like blue and purple. So here, in the end of the Torah reading that gets to which the reading of the story about Rahav and the spies gets paired, is the mitzvah of tzitzit, right? So having fringes on the corners of the 4-cornered garments, and it's basically, you could say it's a string hanging off from the borders, from the edge, from the wall of a piece of clothing, right? And it's a string that's supposed to not just be decorative, but is symbolic. It's a reminder of something, right? And as I highlighted here, in the mitzvah in the Torah, it's supposed to remind us, like, not to let our eyes go astray, right, for things that we might want but are not good for us or are not the right thing to do. But it specifically says asher atem zonim achreiha, that you go whoring after. So I think that what's going on in the story of Rahav is that there's so much textual interplay happening here, and that maybe Rahav's thread is intended to be kind of like, it's the red light version of tzitzit, hanging on the outer wall of the city. Okay, so let's jump into learning a little bit more about Rahav in the rabbinic imagination. So we're going to look at some midrashim, some rabbinic interpretations from the Talmud that are way post-biblical. So don't think that this is necessarily what's actually going on in the biblical story, but imagine as think of it rather as rabbis adding on to the story. Okay, so anybody else want to read text number 4? It's a short one.
I can read it.
Go for it.
So it says, Babylonian Talmud Zahim. They said she, Rahav, was 10 years old when the Israelites left Egypt, and she engaged in prostitution all 40 years that the Jewish people were in the wilderness. After 50 years, she converted. She said, "May I be forgiven as reward for the rope, window, and flax."
Thank you so much. Okay, so I would just want to mark that obviously there's a very disturbing thing here, the idea that she was a prostitute already at 10 years old. Let's not get into that right now, and like whether they can, well, I guess they consider the rabbis are definitely considering the whole entity of prostitution to be problematic, but obviously that raises all kinds of other issues too. But let's not deal with that right now. Okay, so basically the rabbis are imagining into the story that Rahav was a prostitute, like all her days, basically. But after 50 years, not meaning after 50 years of prostitution, but rather at 50 years old, which would put her, like that's at the time when the spies are coming to her, she's now converting, right? So after they save her family and she converts and joins the Jewish people. I didn't include in the book of Joshua in the 6th chapter that when the Israelites are attacking the city of Jericho, they spare Rahav and her family, and that she and her family join the Israelites. It just says like they go amongst them. Now the rabbis of the Talmud are saying it's not just that she's like physically living amongst them. That means that she's converting to Judaism, right? And she says, maybe I'm forgiven for the the bad things that I did as a reward for the rope, the window, and the flax. Now it says chavel here, which is a rope, not the cord, the tikva, but I felt like it was similar enough that maybe our little investigation into the word tikva, hope, is relevant to this. Okay, great. So now we have Rahav is a Jew by choice. Let's look at another piece of Talmud that really elevates her even further.
I can read this one.
Awesome, fantastic.
All right, Rav Nachman said, Huldah was a descendant of Joshua. It is written here, Huldah the prophetess, the wife of Shalom, the son of Tikva, the son of Harchas. And it is written there, and they buried him in the border of his inheritance at Timnat Heres.
Okay, so I'm going to explain that for a sec. So Huldah is a female prophet, a prophetess, and Rav Nachman, who's a Babylonian rabbi, is saying that she is a descendant of Joshua. How do we know that? Because it actually never says in the Tanakh that she's a descendant of Joshua. Rather, the rabbis or Rav Nachman is going to make a sort of a loose literary connection, because she is like her genealogy. She's the son, from the wife of Shalom, who was the son of Tikva, who was the son of Harchas. Okay, so it's not even her direct lineage, it's rather her husband's lineage, but okay, playing fast and loose a little bit. And about Joshua, we learn that he was buried in Timnat Heres. So because Harchas and Heres are very similar words, but not entirely the same, actually. There's a ration there, kind of makes it, another chet in there, that makes a difference, but fine. We're saying, okay, so therefore Huldah is a descendant of Joshua. Okay, now, but notice we've also got that Huldah, her father-in-law was named Tikva, was named Hope. All right, let's keep going with the Talmud here.
Rav Ena the elder brought a baraita against Rav Nachman. 8 prophets who were Kohanim descended from Rahav the prostitute. They are Neriah, Baruch, Sariah, Machseah, Yirmiah, Jeremiah, Chilkiah, Hanamel, and Shalom. Rabbi Yehuda says, also Huldah the prophetess was a descendant of Rahav the prostitute. It is written here, the son of Tikva, and it is written there, this cord Tikva of scarlet thread.
Okay, so the objection is Rahav couldn't be a descendant of Joshua because another rabbi says she's a descendant of Rahav. How do we know? Oh, because her father-in-law's name is Tikva, and Rahav used a Tikva, the scarlet thread cord, to identify where she lived, right? So that's the strange connection being made here. So she's a descendant of Rahav, not of Joshua. And then I will just summarize the last section of this piece of Talmud is basically saying, hey, we can have it both ways. She's a descendant of both Joshua and Rahav. How? Because she converted and married Joshua. Now, the Tanakh, the Bible never says this. It never says that Joshua married Rahav, but that's what the rabbis are going to do to kind of make everything work out. Okay, so now we have Rahav, this prostitute, who is marrying the leader of the Jewish people. Well, she's converting. She's marrying the leader of the Jewish people, which puts her in a pretty big position of power, one would assume. And she has all of these 9 different prophets, 8 men and 1 woman, who descend from her. So she's, would seem to be going from this more lowly, marginal status, literally marginal, like living in the walls of the city, to someone who is like in the leadership of the Jewish people and the progenitor of many prophets, right? Okay. I'm wondering if anyone has any thoughts on the potential connection between tikva as a thread or a cord and tikva as hope. Go for it, Janet.
I see Janet. Go ahead, Janet.
Okay, well, I think when you're searching and you're looking for something, kind of there's that expression like you grab onto any string, any tether that will help you get to the place that you hope to be. So it's kind of a reaching and finding a connection that I see the string representing. I'm not sure about the red color. I also have if I could like throw this in, a question about how did it come to be the blue? Because I knit a talit for myself, and I'm about to work with my rabbi to learn to tie the tzitzit, and I'm doing it with the blue string and with the white.
It's a chelet.
And this is like a very emotional project for me. I've been knitting for a couple of years, and he told me where to get the string. Was it blue because that was a dye that they could get, that was available in what they could get? And what is the
I'm going to jump in just okay. So I'm just the whole big other topic about the significance of blue, but I'll just say in one sentence that blue was something they could get, but it was still quite expensive because it was difficult, because it comes from the secretions of a mollusk that lives in the Mediterranean, which is why, for example, in the Roman Empire, royal blue was reserved for, this is why we call it royal blue, only for royalty. And in fact, if you were a non-royal who wore the blue, which in Hebrew we call techelet, you would be actually liable to death, because it's like you're pretending to be the royalty when you're not, right? Whereas in Judaism, it's like everybody's supposed to wear the royal blue. Like we're supposed to be a mamlechet kohanim and a goy kadosh. We're supposed to be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. So it's sort of, instead of saying like, oh, only some people are holy, rather, no, we're lifting everybody up. Okay. Significance of the red, could be all different kind of possibilities. But the red is shani, that scarlet color, is also used in the making of the Mishkan, the tabernacle. So it maybe has holy kind of connotations as well. Okay, Lauren.
It seems to be that all of this discussion that follows the initial paragraph about her taking in the 2 spies is really proof text about a woman that sees that a woman of courage that sees that she can change the history of what's been subjugating the Israelites by doing the right thing, by number one, by protecting her family, but at the same time, by becoming a participant in this whole process of the evolution and the protection of the Jews against, the people that they're going against here. So I think it's curve fitting. I think all of this is curve fitting and makes the individual, this woman individually, it just adds a dimension to her, because the initial qualities of her were very humanistic.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Any other quick comments about the connection between tikva as hope and tikva as thread?
I was just thinking real quick, based on what Janet was asking, that the thread of blue in the tzitzit says we're all royalty, just like you were describing. And the thread of red here says to me something like anybody can live a holy life, right? That even Rahav, who we might think of as the lowest of the low, we can see holiness in this person. I wonder if there's a connection there, that there's like the hope of being able to see the human being in people that we maybe have a tendency to dehumanize.
Beautiful, great. That kind of relates to one way that I see maybe the connection between the thread and hope, which is that the sort of the amalgam of these various sources that we've been learning, to me, points to the ever-present possibility of change, right? Things are not locked in. Things might look bad. It might seem despairing. You might think, my whole city is going to get decimated. But through this individual action that she does of kindness and protection, she's able to turn around the story, at least for her and her family, right? And then when you add on the rabbinic layer, it's not just that she's saving herself, but then she becomes like a really significant person in our people's history, right? And so, we shouldn't dismiss something or someone thinking like, they're insignificant. They're just like a insignificant little thread of whatever. No, a thread can be really important. A thread can mean the difference between life and death. A thread can mean the difference between despair and hope. And we should grab onto that little thread. And we should, make ourselves reminders to always have hope, right? So whether it's in the literal sense, or, and maybe for some people, like looking at tzitzit might be a reminder of not just the mitzvot, but also that, like, well, if there's a possibility of doing mitzvot, of doing commandments or doing the right thing, then there's also always a possibility of doing, like, being more positive and therefore making the world better. And that gives us hope, right? So I want us to conclude by looking at two other really short texts. I'll just do these. So another one from Eov, from Job. Job is actually the book of the Tanakh of the Bible where the word tikva appears the most. But it is it's pretty much always in like a very like hopeless kind of way, because that's just the nature of the book. So, but here I thought this really connected to the two meanings of tikva. My days fly faster than a weaver's shuttle and come to their end. You can either read it as without hope or when the thread runs out. So it's a brilliant pun going on here within the book of Eov. And now it is saying, he's saying like, life is over before you know it, and there's no hope, like the thread of life runs out, right? So it's really dour, but I think it's really cool how it's playing off these two meanings of hope. But then just to conclude on a more hopeful note, let's look at this last source from the prophet Yirmiyahu, Jeremiah, and I'll read this in Hebrew first. V'yesh tikva la'acharitech ne'um Adonai v'shavu vanim liv'ulam. And there is hope for your future, says the Eternal, and your children shall return to their border. So this is talking about return of the Babylonian exiles back to the land of Israel. But of course, we can, see its resonance in a much broader kind of way. Both just that there's always hope even when things seem bleak, and even in the specific sense of having hope for the return of our fellow Jews back into their own homeland. So I want to thank everybody for learning with me today, and I want to thank Rabbi Micah for inviting me to teach. It's been a pleasure, and I hope that everyone is able to take a little thread of hope from this Torah.
Let me say a huge thank you to Rabbi Aaron Levy. This really hopeful and kind of unexpected lesson, right? Finding hope in a story where we wouldn't necessarily be looking for it. I appreciate the way that you led us through the texts. We are not meeting next week, everyone. We're going to be off for 1 week, and then we'll be back the following week. I'll remind you that by email next Thursday, and as well as with a link to past classes. You can go back and catch up on what you missed. So I wish all of you an early Shabbat Shalom, hoping that we can find little threads of hope in the world all around us and use them to make the world a better place. Thanks, everyone. Take care. Have a good week.